Now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours for the TMFA community. Today, we've got James Wright from James Wright Gallery, a Los Angeles and New York-based gallerist. James and I have known each other for 3 or 4 years. He represented some artists that I quite like. I've actually bought some art from James. I view him as a really savvy business person, a novel gallerist, in that his background and his entry into the art world is non-traditional and quite fascinating, and as just a really generally handsome guy. So so I invited James on here today because he's actually like a gallerist that I would aspire to work with as an emerging contemporary artist. And I think what we'll do today is we'll let James introduce himself. We'll hear a little bit about his backstory and how he became a gallerist. We'll talk about kind of where he's at now that Corona has happened. We'll talk about his advice for artists in getting ready to work with someone like him. And then we'll jump a little bit forward and think about like what the future for galleries like his holds. And then we'll open it up for questions. Welcome, James.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Nice to see everybody. Thanks for having me on. Happy to jump on here and tell you a little bit about my path and story and try and add some value for you guys in your careers. You want me to just kind of give a quick history of, cool. So I'm a bit of an outsider to the art world. I got involved, I'd say 2014, in kind of privately dealing artwork and working closely with a couple of artists. Actually grew up with an artist who represented the gallery now, Brent Estabrook, and we're childhood friends, and ended up getting him into a couple of galleries along the way. And this is like 2013, 14 timeframe. And we ran into some unpleasant experiences, which is unfortunately not uncommon in the art world, where checks bounce, money disappears, paintings disappear, and the galleries that you thought were going to be good stewards of your work and career do things that are not quite right, or for various number of reasons, not always nefarious, but just a lack of business knowledge or unfortunate circumstances. But that's what kind of motivated me to start my own gallery, was to try and create a vehicle and a platform that could not only, I think, approach artist careers and building careers and hosting exhibitions kind of in a forward-looking way, but also treat the artist better. And so things like I pay the artists out immediately. I've paid artists out before I've even gotten money from clients, just to kind of keep their cash flow going and things like that. But so that's kind of the spirit and the heart that our gallery started with in 2014. In 2015, we moved from San Francisco to LA, and in San Francisco, we were dealing out of our apartment. Moved to LA, got a larger loft, and continued kind of hosting and dealing small scale out of our apartment. And that grew until 2017. We opened our physical space that we have now in LA and started doing some shows and exhibitions there. And then right before COVID, opened a little private space in New York that's kind of a three-floor walk up to kind of privately meet with clients and show them new work from our artists in New York. And I haven't been there since January 11th, 2020, essentially when we set that up. So have been mostly based in LA now, working a lot from home and from upstairs at the gallery, just dealing a lot online with email and Instagram and things like that. So we can get more into those topics later, but just trying to evolve with the times and keep things going and keep momentum. So that's probably the long and short.
And so when you said, hey, Brent, we're going to start a gallery together, or I'm going to start a gallery and start representing you, what did you view, or how did you delineate like the roles of you, the gallerist, and him, the artist, and what was the responsibilities and how did those split?
Interesting. So I don't know that we ever put a lot of effort into it. It was really just two people coming together with kind of an aligned mission, but different skill sets. And and so it just naturally worked really well, right? So my background is business. I hate to admit it, but I went to business school and worked in investing and real estate and some other things like that. And so I developed a very kind of regimented understanding for business and structure and legal and things like that. And those are the things most artists don't want to deal with, right? So it's not, there didn't really have to be a conversation around I'm going to do the business and you do the painting. And so it was very natural. But I've been in businesses where um, myself and co-founders have the same skill sets, and that creates challenges because you end up, kind of drifting towards the same responsibilities, and it doesn't work because things get left behind. So fortunately, I'm not a painter, and I'm not going to do the paintings. And likewise, Brent or other artists we work with, they don't want to do accounting. They don't want to sometimes talk to the collectors, and so um, it evolves. But I think if you're an artist and you can be smart about business, and Matt, I would say that that would reflect you. I think there's tremendous opportunity. And if you're not, you just have to find people that can help bolster, those various skill sets and needs and things. And we can get more into that too.
Yeah, well, let's double click on that. Like, what are the things that artists should be doing on the back end to make themselves more desirable to a gallery like you or gallerist like you? And
Yeah,
then, and yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it starts with the work. So I think you really have got to double down and put the work in there. And whether that's learning on your own, going to art school, like whatever your path is, I mean, there's many different paths, and one is, I don't think, better than the other, but you've got to get yourself and your work to a place where those next conversations and levels even make sense. And I think getting your mind right too is something that I've gone through and I continue to go through with business and life. And I've written down a couple of different points, but I mean, if you don't value your work, you can't expect someone else to value your work. And if you don't create as if you're creating, and again, there's different paths, there's different destinations, and we can talk more about that. But if you don't create with the intent that it's $1 million, a couple $100,000 painting, a museum worthy painting, if you're not creating with that intention, you're not going to get those types of outcomes. You may get great outcomes, but they're just going to be different. So I think understanding where you want to go is probably step one in parallel to just focusing on your work.
And when you say like an artist needs to focus on their work, is do you find that like a gallerist is the one that recognizes an artist when they've achieved a certain caliber of work, or can an artist decide that they've achieved a certain caliber and then reach out to a gallerist? And do you see different outcomes with those two approaches, and which do you recommend?
Yeah, anything is possible, right? But I would say, I don't know how many emails we've gotten for artwork submissions, but we've never worked with anybody from an email submission, right? So just the odds that people are more inclined to reach out before they're ready than when they're ready. And I would argue that they probably know it inside. Um, but it's a hard thing to gauge. I think this day and age with technology and the internet, you probably, you should, if you're being active, be able to get some level of traction first, before you even need to bring a gallery into the mix. Um,
What do you
and
view as that
all,
traction? Is that like having individual clients reaching out and buying works from you, that kind of stuff? Or what is traction in your mind?
again, it can manifest different ways, and depending on where you want to go, there's different types of traction, and it can that could be a rabbit hole to go down. But I think creating your work, building a peer group, doing things like your program, and just kind of getting as much in the flow and in the mix, and kind of immersing yourself in it is extremely valuable. Go to exhibitions and shows, and don't be afraid to meet the artist whose exhibition it is, or their friend circle, or the gallerist. But don't be annoying. Don't interrupt the gallerist in the midst of an art fair, or a solo exhibition, but don't be afraid to make a presence out and about town. I think that's important.
So you'd suggest meeting gallerists at art shows, at art fairs, but not interrupting. Like,
Yeah, maybe not even. It just depends. Probably not even meeting them at fairs. It's very chaotic, and they're trying to make their booths successful for the fair. But I'd say exhibitions, or don't go opening night. Right, go after the show's been up for 2 weeks and has 2 weeks left, and you may not even catch the gallerist, but you'll catch the receptionist or the associate there, and those are great people to meet. And
say I want my work to be $100,000 work. I think my work is $100,000 work. How do I validate that it's $100,000 work, and how do I look for examples of other works like that, and like what are the characteristics of $100,000 work?
I think it's, before you get there, it's let's start with the 1,000, let's start with the 5,000, let's start with the 10,000. I think 100 happens, and it happens because of the work and the effort that you do, and it multiplying over time. When we started out and I founded the gallery, and Brent was just getting started, I've got an old notebook where I wrote that my goal was to sell a piece for $10,000. Like, to me, we were outsiders coming into the art world, and this is 2015, probably 14. And now I realize how small that goal was, right? And I think we achieved that within months. And that's not for everybody. I mean, we've been very fortunate that Brent has had immense success, that been referred, by various collectors and a couple of institutions in pretty good terms. And so I think that happens too, where Adrian Genny's an artist I really, really admire. And he was undiscovered for the longest time, and then started to get traction and has exploded. But the Plan B gallery is really based around his success. And so I think that's a common phenomenon, to have kind of an artist that helps kind of form the tip of the spear, as you'd say, and create a bit of a wake for the other artists. And so I think, if you're hanging around artists that are starting to get traction in their work, and you're making good work, like, rising tide will lift all ships. There's definitely, some value in that.
So we've been talking about pricing models within the community, and
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about pricing on a linear square foot basis. We've talked about pricing on materials plus hours. How do you think about pricing artists as you bring them into your gallery? And what might you recommend to this community as they think about pricing their work?
Yeah, I think a couple of thoughts on that. I think pricing is tricky, because it's an amalgamation of all those things that you just mentioned and more. And so I think the important things are to don't undervalue your work. I think I see that a lot, where it's the weirdest thing. We'll do shows, and I'll either see artists that put a price on something, or outside of shows just through Instagram, and the price is so low that you're just kind of like, man, you're not even valuing yourself and the effort you've put into something. But then there's the other end, which is, we'll talk to some artists and maybe think about working with them, and the price that you get will all of a sudden be up closer to the price that they know you've been selling works at, but it has no resemblance to where they're at in their career, or where they've actually been transacting pieces at. So I think there's no right or there probably is right or wrong ways, but I think you want to start reasonable, and you want to get traction, and you want to be respectable. And it also depends, I think the smartest here, maybe this is a better way to answer that question. I think the smartest thing for an artist starting out is to keep their day job, so that they do not need to survive off their art, so that they can afford to hold on to pieces and only sell to whom it makes sense, and for what price it makes sense. That is the probably best way I can answer that question. I think too often artists, even if they have a job or they try and go all in too soon, and if they don't have that stability, they end up doing things that cannibalize their pricing. And it's very, very difficult to build a career and build respect. I think if you're having to discount pieces or you're selling pieces to different people that walk in the door based on what your bank account looks like that day, and unfortunately it's probably more common than anyone realizes. But
What I'm kind of hearing from you is that like this process of becoming an artist is this like kind of long journey, and achieving a status wherein you could be represented by a gallerist like you is one step along this journey, but there's
yeah,
so many steps to get to that point. And another
yeah,
thing I'm hearing from you is that maybe the best way into the gallery of your dreams is via a peer network of artists working with that gallerist rather than approaching the gallerist directly. For
yeah,
example, becoming friends with Brent and having Brent respect your work is
yeah,
probably a more likely path to getting your attention than approaching you at an art fair, that kind of thing.
most definitely. Yeah, and I think that's true for a lot of galleries. And we watch for a while because I want to see how an artist evolves. And I might find out about an artist, take a look, and I like one of the five pieces I see, right? So then we'll sit back and we'll see, okay, which direction are they evolving? Because it's it's visual arts, right? It's aesthetic taste, and my gallery is a reflection of my aesthetic taste. And so yeah, I want to make sure that I'm not doing something with an artist because there was one piece they did that kind of gravitated me towards it. I want to make sure that it's much more substantial than that.
How important is the holistic studio practice, like being able to step into an artist's studio, see their process, uh, respective to the final product and the work itself in your mind, in terms of your commitment to working with an artist, but also in the minds of the buyer?
Yeah. Okay. Great. So from the gallerist perspective and the collector, I think for the gallerist, I think it's extremely important, and whether that's the person whose name is on the gallery or associates and assistants, and we're relatively small, so I do a lot of that. At the larger galleries, they will designate associates who are in charge of landing other artists. And Periton's fascinating. They've got a whole internal system of voting on artists, and so anyone in the gallery organization can make a suggestion or recommendation, and there's essentially anonymized voting within the system to filter up the people to the top of the artists that they may want to work with. And I think it's brilliant, really. Instagram and things can also provide that to some extent in mass like this. But um, I think for the gallerist, you've got to get out. You got to see what's behind it. And for me, there's the work, there's the process. I went to engineering school, so I'm studied a lot of materials and things. So I pay a lot of attention to the quality behind a piece of work. And not to say that an artist has to follow all the rules, but are you signing and titling the back of your painting? Like we can zoom in and zoom out, but like there's a level of quality and detail that I think is really important. That because once a gallery starts working with an artist, unless you've got the resources to go do all of that stuff for them, it flows so much better if the artist is finishing the work and not sending me photos and then repainting over the piece again. And now I've got to go in and change 3 different platforms I'm on to reflect the new. And that's if they told me, not a collector trying to buy it and then you find out it's been changed, right? And so I think that level of professionalism carried through cannot be underestimated. Um,
Could we double click on some of the items that make an artist professional in your mind? Some things
yeah,
that artists ought to be paying attention to. You mentioned signing on the back. You mentioned photographing the work. Like, what are
yeah.
those? What is that checklist of things that an artist needs to pay attention to?
So just finishing the work well, right? So are you working on the best canvas or panel or materials you can afford, right? We all have to be reasonable or rational. Signing your name, dating it, titling it, all of those things that kind of make a finished piece a finished piece. You don't want to end up, the shipper's there and you're scrambling trying to get a signature or whatever, come up with a title last minute. So I think those things are really important, and that should just be automatic, right? I don't want to overemphasize that too much, but taking great photos of your work to the highest resolution possible, I think, is extremely important. The artists that we have the most success with are taking all those things really seriously. They're getting, we use Dropbox to sync it up so that we can get it into all of our platforms and in our inventory system, so that when a collector asks about an artist or about a style of work, we've got available, inventory and pictures to reference. It's not me having to do a text message to track down a piece to then share. So it's you want to streamline that process so that there's as little time as possible between someone interested and getting them what they need to make a decision. And that gets lost in the weeds a lot. And I think, so there's just, doing good work. Let's summarize the first one. There's taking amazing photos, and that's only going to become more important because what happens, all of our computer screens get better, our phone screens get better, the NFT and digital art becomes available. And so you have to think about your work as something that you're producing now, but it's value for your life. And did you take good enough photos that you can now go print a book and you've got good resolution? I know an artist who, and we would probably fall into the same trap, went to do a book, but all their earlier works were terrible photos. And their later works, they started taking it more serious. So that's something to just start early, with the best camera you have or best camera you can afford. Learn Photoshop, learn lighting, and take great photos. And I think what I have seen to some extent is, I think first and foremost, as an artist, you have to be the steward of your career, right? So you have got to do the work to put all these things in place to make you more attractive to a gallery, but also to help you continue to be successful once you're in a gallery. And I've seen it more times than I care to admit, where we'll start looking at and then maybe try and work with an artist who's just hungry, and then they get in the gallery or you do a show, and it's like all the momentum slows down. And so, the gallery certainly, has to accept their responsibility for some of that. But as an artist this day and age, it's important that you put the momentum and build the momentum in your own career, no matter what gallery you're working with. And the gallery success with you is only going to be, equivalent to, the success, momentum, and energy you're creating.
Kind of a slight tangent. Have you worked with artists who have had commissions requested through the gallery, and how do you manage that process or recommend artists manage that process?
Yeah, I could probably add a lot of value on quick tactical questions like this too. So commissions, yes. In the early days before we started a gallery, Brent had another gallery got a commission for him, told him the client wanted something, Brent painted it, and the client backed out. And there was no repercussions, no anything. And now Brent was left with this piece that was really a tangent of a series he was working on too. And that was really, really disappointing. And actually there's another one we had, but you get the story. So what we do typically is 50% deposit up front, and then the balance, prior to shipping. And that works. I think that's a fair way. That requires people to get serious and show a level of commitment before you spend the time and effort to go do something. And to elaborate just on commissions, commissions are fantastic if you're an artist trying to get going and get traction and stability or make additional income aside from your job. As you get more successful, you will want to limit those, because what can happen is commissions can kind of keep you stuck in the place you're at. and stop you from exploring your techniques or processes that will take you into your future. And so I think you should do them. You should keep a list of people that are interested in them so that you always have a place to go in a time of need. But don't overwhelm yourself with them if you can afford to, and also try and retain as much creative control as you can. So ideally it's directly in line with stuff you're working on, or it's a new piece that you would have created anyway. It's just now you have someone who wants it before you even put paint to canvas. And I think that can give you a bit of confidence and strength as well.
What I'm hearing is that it's important as an artist to keep momentum going and keep iterating and keep evolving. Um, do you have any recommendations on like the cadence of evolution? Like how many pieces should be in a series before you say, okay, that series is good and done and we should keep it moving? Or are there any indicators from the market that
Yeah.
suggest that you should stay in a series for a long period of time?
I don't. That's a tough one to quantify. I'll say this: George Condo is one of my favorite painters. He, to some extent, has painted a lot of his different things, styles throughout his career. He's kind of dipped in and out, and I think if you stacked it all up and looked at it, what you'd see evolution in techniques and influence, but then recarried back through different series. I think that's very powerful because that allows people who are with you to kind of draw a connection. But I don't think you want to be hamstrung by it. I think you get in trouble if every painting you do or every week or month you're doing something wildly different. Then I don't. You're either not. That's not the right approach either. To put it simply. In my opinion, I think that shows a bit like a lack of rigor in really diving in and giving a concept or an idea enough life. Now you may have an idea, try something and it doesn't work and you go away from it. That's fine. But if you're creating 3 pieces and then you move on, but you're trying to create 3 totally different, and you're trying to tell people that you're these 3 are really really good and important, but now these, it's just repetition, right? I think Warhol is probably the master, and it works. And so I think the cheat or the hack is to do the same thing over and over. And I think there's logic to that, but I don't think you want to do that forever because you just won't evolve. And maybe that's more my personal taste, right? I like to see an artist who's extremely good and nails something and captures me, and see where they go with that. Whether it's the technique or their color palette, or it really depends on the work, I guess, to get more specific. But
is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is important for this audience, which is emerging contemporary artists kind of figuring out their careers, some selling well, some just getting started? We'll go there. I have a last question, then we'll open it up to the audience for the last 10, 15 minutes.
I'll think on that while we continue and see if I come back to it. But I'll just say, do the work, keep doing the work, create your ass off, take really high res photos. We touched on that. Share your work. How many of you have a website versus don't have a website, right? Or is there a bio? And if you don't want to put a bio, fine, put 3 lines of bio. Like, push yourself to do something and work towards filling in the blanks. I think that's really important. That it doesn't have to be final when you get it up, but you've got to have something there to just, again, start to set that level of seriousness about what you're doing. Be authentic and put yourself out there. So that goes to meeting other artists in your cohort, whether that's online, digital, or in your local community. If you're fortunate to be in New York, Brooklyn, Miami, LA, like, you probably want to get face to face with some people too. Once you start having collectors, spend time with them. I mean, that's been the greatest blessing of my life, and my role in this industry is the people that I've met along the way, and they're fascinating, and those are the people that will carry you to where you want to go. So don't underestimate that. I mean, my whole goal this year before COVID hit was to just travel around and get one-to-one with people a whole lot more. So I'm looking forward to things going back to normal a bit. Um, don't chase the money. So that's the other thing, is I think, and that's back to valuing your work, having a job that gives you stability, so that you don't have to sell. So if it's not every person is the right person for your art, and that depends on what stage in your career you're at, and where you want to go with your career and all of that. But I think we pride ourselves on making decisions for the long term, and that can manifest itself in many ways. But I think you guys are all smart enough to kind of know where that, when that arises, what it means. I think that's it. Yeah, those are the big ones.
I love that insight, which is that the sale doesn't end with you delivering your first work to a collector. It's like
Yeah,
it's this process of building a relationship with your patrons. And I think that's
yeah,
underestimated. It's like someone bought something from you, you shipped it to them. That doesn't mean the relationship's over. It means the
yeah,
relationship just got started. I think that's a
yeah.
really nice insight. Who are some artists that we should be paying attention to, just in terms of like
Hmm.
how they're creating, how they're representing themselves online, where their career's going, so that we could perhaps watch them a little bit more closely and glean insights from them? If you can share, I know that some of this is
Yeah.
like insiders.
Um, let me, I can. An interesting thing. Let's get a list to you, and you can post it somewhere internally or whatever, because then I could put a little bit more thought into it rather than shooting from the hip. But I really like Robert Nava. Um, when I first got into art, probably wouldn't have been the case, but there's just something about it, again, that resonated with me. It's been pretty awesome to see him go from essentially selling out of his studio to represented by Pace now in a very short period of time. And but he deserves it. He's Yale MFA, studied under Peter Halley and Uma Baba, which those are two names I definitely would check out. So he's definitely on my short list. Then there's some artists that are further along, and then artists who are closer to the emerging side. So we'll put a list together, and I'd love to share that with everybody.
Fantastic. You cool with 5-10 minutes of questions? We still have about 10 minutes before.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. That was super insightful. And whether or not you realize it, I think that there were a lot of beautiful insights in there that create a lot of value for this community.
Cool.
I wanted to open up the conversation. Please, one at a time, unmute yourselves. If you see that someone else is unmuted, like kind of make eye contact and figure it out. And then feel free to ask James questions. If we've already covered it, please try to make it new and interesting. We've got 24 community members in here right now, which is a pretty good number.
Love it.
Go ahead.
What would you recommend as someone who is finishing uni soon, doing a fine art degree? What would you recommend are the next steps in pursuing a further art career?
Do you have a website?
Yeah.
Are you on Instagram? Yep. Get to work, just get after it. And all those things we talked about, build your cohort. So you're fortunate. I think that's one of the things that university gives you, is it gives you a cohort, and it gives you, that experience with critique. And I think that's really, really valuable. And I think the only advice I would give, and I think you're in this program, so I think you're already there, is just don't hold too rigidly to any of the rules that you were taught in art school in terms of the business, if you will. I think that's important. So if you can combine your kind of rigorous education with expanding your mind and taking advantage of the landscape that's in front of you right now, that really has no barriers, I think you'll be just fine.
have a question. I wrote it in the chat, but what is your opinion on up and coming artists having an art agent? This is something that I'm like super unfamiliar with, especially with social media and like marketing yourself is so normal now that I made an assumption because I just didn't really research it. Like, I didn't really know if art agents were still a thing. So many people represent themselves these days. Is that something that's impressive, or is that like an old school eye roll, or is that necessary, especially if you're like just starting to like build and like
What are they going to do for you?
well, personally, the benefits that I was like looking into were networking and like people who are agents that have other clients that like know other collectors, just because for me, my network is a lot of other artists that are also up and coming. So I'm trying to grow that network, which is part of why I'm in this community of like seeing people at different levels above and under. That's the one benefit for me, but that's why I was curious from a gallery perspective.
Are they looking to get paid hourly, or like what's the agreement? I guess I need to understand that a little more too.
Right now it's just like a idea or conversation that I had that's very unofficial, and that's why I was like curious from a gallery perspective. But the what I was hearing was like a commission of like, okay, if I sell these prints for you, I'll take 20%. And like draft a contract up for that specific.
So, I mean, there's no reason you shouldn't create a second email within your email and answer it as somebody else that's your assistant and make it be you. Like, if you want to just give the impression of like a more accomplished, start there. That's free. Again, train yourself to do the work, and then it's always easier to get other people involved later. But I do think that if you find people that can place your paintings and place them intelligently, respectfully, for 20%, do it all day. Like that's your ability to scale, and it's not a fixed cost, so it's something that is success based. So I think it's great. I think you want to have some level of knowledge or control over where the end piece goes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, James. Hey, James.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you? So I had a quick question for you. It may sound silly, but there's a little drop of nitroglycerin in it. Given the importance that people put on Instagram for artists, is there really a hashtag that gallerists follow?
Probably. And I probably should. If you got any ideas?
No, but I'm open to hearing it.
No, there's not. But I do think, and I'm no master. I'm fortunate we got on Instagram early in 2015, and that's a large part of our early success for sure. I need to get better at taking advantage of how the algorithms and things have changed. So I tell all of the artists I work with, not all of them listen, but you got to get active on there because there's zero cost and there's only upside. And so this idea that it's cool to be kind of hidden away, and the artists that no one knows about or you don't see new paintings from, I think that's such an old school methodology. I think if you know who Daniel Arsham is, I mean, he's always posting stories, and he's got a lot going on, but there's a reason he's doing it, because it's effing working for him. So, and I could to just my proof of that is we'll have artists who will post a painting. There maybe won't be a ton of traction. They'll post the painting a few months later, or a half a year, a year later, after it's already sold, and there'll be this inflow of interest. And so not every post you do is going to reach your audience. And so don't be afraid to post it again after a respectable amount of time, but curate that Instagram account so that it looks right.
Cool. Thank you.
We've got time for 2 more questions. Who's it going to be?
And we'll keep going just a little bit. I got maybe.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do galleries notice artists? Like if we don't email them, or if we don't have enough followers or stuff, how do we get them to notice us?
So it's interesting. I was talking to a photographer right before the new year, and he was telling me how he's had some brand deals or brands contact him to come shoot, and then they realize that he has, you know, I don't know, 2,000 followers compared to 50,000 or whatever, and they'll actually decide who they're going to allow to shoot their product based on how many followers the photographer has. And I think that is that's a terrible thing. I think it's that's a real risk. I mean, I get the logic, but I think you can't create a hard and fast rule like that. But as far as getting noticed, I mean, that gets back to you got to move on all fronts. So you got to utilize your Instagram, you got to have the website, then you got to meet your peer group of artists and get out and about with them, and you got to meet the associates at the galleries and things like that. So you've got to kind of move forward on all fronts to the best you can. And if you're working a you know, full-time or part-time job, that's going to cut into your ability. So you just have to, especially early on, figure out how to keep all those balls in the air.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to.
I would just real quick. I'll say, you know, it's the quality of interaction or the quality of introduction matters much more than the introduction. I think that's where the blind emails kind of fall short. So it may take a little while longer, but the impact once received is going to be much greater to do the work of meeting the peer group of artists. We've essentially every artist has been in a show with us, save for a few. We've met through our artist peer group. So I mean, that's quantitatively a good strategy.
And that kind of speaks to how we're functioning with these Instagram pods. Like, we're all promoting each other, and as a result of that, you know, one of our success means a lot of our success. And so that's kind of one of the things that is built into this community, which I think we haven't fully realized just yet, but it's good to have it reiterated from James.
So I wanted to ask, for strategy wise, is it best to try to submit work to different galleries and see which one sticks, or should you aim for the one you want and try to connect within?
Yeah, so you kind of hit on it, which is not all galleries are going to fit. So I think you got to do that legwork up front to figure out, you know, who's representing the types of artists that you fit best with, for sure.
James, another question, which might be kind of silly to ask a gallerist, but is a gallerist necessary for an artist to be successful?
You know, I was thinking as I'm answering that, like, go build success and traction yourselves, and then worry about the gallery later. You don't want to have shows that are unsuccessful with galleries. Like, the reality is, you know, some shows sell out and some shows don't sell any work, and that's okay. But stack the deck in odds in your favor. So build your audience online through your website, through networking at shows and things, and do that work, because it's going to make, when you start getting involved with galleries, it's just going to make it a lot more successful. It's going to be a lot more fun, and the outcomes will be better.
Yeah, and the way to incept your way into a gallery is to become really good friends with artists represented by that gallery and have them like your work first. Is kind of what I heard today. Bernie.
Can I ask a question? Oh.
James, what's your opinions on like artists doing their own pop-ups and kind of their own interesting gallery-like things for a temporary basis? Like, I could think of particular examples, but
I'm for it. I mean, it depends, you know, where you're trying to go and how you'd like to build your career. But again, it's like, if no gallery will talk to you, or, you know, it's not right, but you know you can do something on your own, then do it. Like, pave the path, blaze the trail. But do it respectfully, and realize that every step you take is building that momentum to wherever you want to get. And so You know, a pop-up can be done right and a pop-up can be done wrong probably as well.
I think one of the insights I've gleaned here is that like the onus is on the artist to prepare themselves to be able to be well represented by a gallery when the time is right. But a gallery is not necessarily required in order for an artist to succeed. What is required is for an artist to think like a gallerist and present their work in as professional a way as possible. For example, I don't really have a gallerist, but I've sold thousands of works.
Mm-hmm.
I eventually want to get a gallerist, but my work isn't that good yet. So I'm okay with that. Like I know that I have another 5 years before a Gagosian or someone like that's going to represent me. But that doesn't mean I'm giving up on my career or I'm not continuing to push forward.
Yeah, that's it. You can't move forward standing still. So, and I think, you know, I'm also mindful in galleries maybe as well as how much work has an artist put out in the world, and not created, but actually placed with collectors or other owners. Because as your career starts to take off, that can become a counterweight to raising prices and other things. So if you've got a lot of paintings owned by people who aren't necessarily people of means, it's possible that they might start to try and sell your pieces, you know, the first moment you start to hit those higher prices. If you sold it for a couple hundred and now you're at 10,000, that's a lot of money to the people that could afforded it. So I think you've got to be, and that's where I say you got to be thoughtful about where you place your work, and part of that depends on where do you want to go.
Awesome.
Create a lot of work. You don't have to sell it all.
Any other
there's a stat I like that his name's David Hockney owns 75% of the paintings he ever created. I think that's really interesting.
Totally. Any other burning questions before we give James a round of applause and let him go about his day? Yes.
One.
We have 3 more.
Okay, let's hit it.
Maruna.
Hi. I was just wondering, are there a few crucial questions that you'd expect an artist to ask you or to ask of a gallerist when, let's say, they're introduced, they know each other, and they're thinking of, okay, let's work together? Is there something you'd think, oh, you should have definitely asked this?
No, nothing's coming to mind immediately. I mean, there may be something, but I think just again, being authentic, being you.
Anesse?
Hi. You mentioned many times that we need to sell to the right people. So how do we understand who are the right people and who are the wrong people?
It's a very tricky question because it depends where your desired destination is, and it depends where you're starting from. You know, if you're fortunate to come from a place of money and be able to go to art school and do this for a living and not have a need for a side job and career, then you should wait until you're placing those works in that echelon of people that you already have access to, and not everyone is fortunate like that, and we weren't. So early on, it may be your friends and family and people in your cohort. But so I think it's not easy to do, or you know, there's no hard and fast rule, but it's more of a something I want to plant in your guys' minds as you navigate, because it will come in effect at different times, and it will mean different things to each of you depending on where you're at and where you're trying to go. But we're at a place now where anyone who's asking to acquire a painting, it's not about sending them the catalog and working out whatever painting they want. We want to know who those people are, where they're based. There's certain geographies that we're trying to grow into, so we want to place paintings there and things like that. So there's a lot of details and many layers to the strategy, I guess.
Are you devaluing your work if you take on commissions that you can do but aren't necessarily in the style of art that you like to do?
Maybe, maybe not. So do it and don't post it. Don't tie it to you as strongly, you know. And again, that your way to navigate that, again, what did I say? I said don't chase the money. So if you're not in a place of need, or you don't need to do that, and you can say no, say no. And if you do need to do that because, you know, it's going to buy you more supplies to do the work that you want to do, then take it on, and you know, be a little more quiet about how you associate it with you. If you're fortunate to have an assistant, maybe it's a project for the assistant. There's a few different ways to navigate that.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. I think that's it. I want to just have everyone unmute themselves and give James a round of applause and say thank you for that really insightful talk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
James, so
We'll do it
one thing
again.
we do at the end is we have you tell us what hand gesture we should all be doing, and then we
that's
screen
great.
grab it with one or two hands. What do you want to do?
Oh boy. Oh boy. That one was pretty good you just did. What was that? Was that this?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Left eye, everybody? Left eye only?
It's a 3-pointer.
And then a reminder, screen grab this and share it and tag James in the community so we can get more people involved.
Medici and James Wright Gallery. Love it. So good. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna stop recording now.